History movies are normally about very serious and often terrifying subjects. It seems that we have to resort to fantasy to have fun, but that is not always the case. I always want to point out good historical movies, especially ones that make me laugh all the way through, yet somehow manage to capture the essence of what they're depicting. And there's only one movie I can think of that does so magnificently. That movie is Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines. Now, this is definitely a fictional movie, but it illustrates something that fiction can do whereas regular based on a true story movies cannot. The movie takes us into the weird and wacky world of the early days of aviation, when men risked their lives for the thrill of flight. The problem back then was that the science of aeronautics simply had not been formed yet. Engines were too heavy and inefficient, and there were some decidedly stupid ideas on how to get aloft.
Aren't you sitting the wrong way round?
Of course I'm not. You take me for an idiot.
This is my latest invention. You see, the wind resistance on the tail is less than it would be on the wings.
This movie illustrates those confundities by constantly mocking them. What it does best is bring together the disparate elements of early aviation and showcase the trouble that was flight while thoroughly mocking the entire affair in an entertaining manner. And it simply takes the lift from the wings of those who want to treat this subject with gravitas. It begins with a hilarious narration about how man has always tried to fly.
Ever since man started to think, he's wanted to fly. But flying was strictly for the birds.
With comedian Red Skelton acting as the guy trying and failing throughout the years. Then we get to see a montage of failed flying contraptions, ending with
Shelley made what many people claimed was the first long-distance flight. No doubt about it, by 1910, flying had become the rage.
From then on, the movie focuses on an air race with a huge prize designed to help the state of air technology.
An air race, gentlemen. Initiated, sponsored, and rewarded by the Daily Post. An air race which will show that Britannia not only rules the waves, but intends in future to rule the skies. An air race between the two most important capitals of the world, London and Paris.
People come from as far away as Japan and Arizona to fly from London to Paris, taking place in 1910. They take their time in setting up the race and the characters as they prepare around the aerodrome for the beginning of the race. Hijinks ensue with such different characters in one place, and then the race takes place 2/3 into the movie. We watch as one character tries to sabotage the rest, and the race goes on, with one person after another crashing until the two main characters come in with a spectacular finish. Each nationality is a comical rendition of that country's particular nationalism, with the Frenchman being a womanizer, the German overly militaristic, the Italian passionate about everything, and the American being a simpleton cowboy. The English get two barbs in the side. The main character being a rigid and stuffy man bound by foibles that hinder his relationship to the woman he loves.
Well, are you intending to propose to her?
Well, with your permission, sir. With just one snag, sir.
Oh?
It's finding the time for married life.
And the other is a conniving nobleman who uses privilege and underhanded tactics to sabotage his competition. Of course, that means he's the first person to land in the sewage farm near the aerodrome.
You bounder! Look what you've done to my airplane!
Although everyone ends up there for one reason or another. The Japanese pilot is an interesting nod to Japanese imperialism, donning a headband reminiscent of the kamikazes, called a hachimaki. But just in case people want to get all offended, it is pointed out in the movie how silly that is after the Japanese plane crashes due to English sabotage.
Get me a knife!
You ain't going to commit air carry.
Of course not, you bloody fool! I've got to cut my way out, haven't I?
All of these stereotypes are meant to point to the growing antagonism of the era just prior to World War I.
With only 16 hours to go before the start of the greatest race of all time, temperatures have reached boiling point here at Brookcliffe. Not surprising, perhaps, when so many different nationalities are involved.
The Germans and the French are especially antagonistic, with the French constantly screwing with the Germans, eventually ending up in a ridiculous duel with balloons and blunderbusses. Laughably enough, there really was a hot air balloon duel in 1808, and the movie is purposefully alluding to how ludicrous that is. Besides having this kind of international antagonism, having important world-changing technological fairs was somewhat usual at that point in time.
The spirit of the occasion, sir. The entente cordiale.
If you ask me, too much entente and far too cordial. The trouble with these international affairs is that they attract foreigners.
The whole thing is great, hilarious fun, but at the same time it is making a historical point. You see, it does have some merits in terms of accuracy. There really was such a thing as prizes offered by the Daily Mail. They had a whole series of prizes of this sort, beginning with £10,000 for the first flight from London to Manchester. The first cross-channel flight prize was awarded to Louis Béraud in 1909, receiving £1,000 for the deed. Wishing to get the London-Manchester prize, two dudes named Claude Grahame-White and Louis Paulhan took off at fairly similar times. They ended up racing for the prize, which was won by Paulhan because Grahame-White had overloaded his plane, despite having done a first-time night flight. There were significant air races that began at this point in time too. The Daily Mail began its Circuit of Britain air race in 1911. Before that, an American newspaper mogul named Gordon Bennett had created a series of airplane races modeled after his ballooning and car races. All of these prizes propelled aviation technology further and faster, only being trumped by the stupendous advances that World War I brought. This movie simplifies all that into one event. By doing so, it doesn't have to get bogged down specifying date after date, accomplishment after accomplishment. Instead, it gets to focus on the feeling of early aviation. And this is where the movie actually adds to our conception of history. They never say that early aviation was safe, actually far from it.
Now, Patricia, you can't blame your father for thinking that flying is dangerous. It is.
It ain't the going up that discourages me. It's the different ways you keep finding of coming down.
The movie makes fun of the audacity it took to face such danger by showing some ridiculous situations in which people crashed. Sometimes they even repair stuff in absurd ways, like how the American character repairs a wing strut mid-flight with his waist belt. Or this scene.
You haven't got a pipe cleaner I could run through it, have you?
Why, if you've got a pipe cleaner, have we? Oh, wait a minute.
The state of aviation at the time makes such jokes possible, where even a short trip was quite an accomplishment.
Started Folkestone. I boarded my machine and flew all the way here.
4 miles. Amazing.
This frivolous attitude helps convey the central point. These adventurers were taking risks for the fun of it. In an atmosphere of obliviousness, foolishness inevitably follows. There is no point in glorifying who did what first, because that doesn't matter as much as the will to do it. It's an important historical point, because we give far too much credit to the Wright brothers and forget the incremental and iterative nature of invention, which the history of flight really does show. Maybe I'll make an episode on that point like I did on cell phones a while back. But the movie is more trying to point out the kind of character it took to be one of these magnificent men.
Just a second. Look, I'm going all out to win. Now, do you think I have a chance?
Well, that's entirely up to you.
This point is made further by the aircraft that are used. For this movie, they replicated 20 airplanes, 6 of which could fly. They also had some antique models, several of which could fly as well. Even the cars, which are not the focus at all, are awesome to behold. But it is the flying of these amazing planes that is part of the spectacle. At one point, the movie has a biplane's wheel getting sabotaged, and the American having to land it on the skid. Well, that was actually done for the movie's production. Much of the flying in this movie is real flight. In terms of inaccuracy, I only have a couple of things to point out. Some of the planes are not what they're said to be. For instance, what the American is flying is not a Curtiss.
That's a Wright biplane, isn't it?
No, that's a Curtiss.
But a Bristol box kite, which was actually a British plane. But it's understandable to fudge that a little bit. It is also made out to seem like the real footage at the beginning of the film is stuff that happened before 1910, when most of it actually happened afterward. If you are really interested, I've made a list of all the airplanes I could figure out and linked it in the description. Besides that though, most of the planes replicated are from 1910 or prior. If you're a fan of aviation history, or just want a good laugh, this is well worth checking out. You'll especially like the end of the movie, plus that song is just so damn catchy.
Those magnificent